Hey, good morning, everybody. Or afternoon, whatever time it is for y'all. Like I'd mentioned, it's solo today. Hey, Ren wasn't able to make it. As I've offered in the past, if anybody ever wants to join or come hop on and hang out, they're always welcome to. The way I'm doing things these days, though, gotta know ahead of time or have a few minutes to add people because I'm using OBS instead of like the Streamlabs, StreamYard stuff. But I don't know how long we'll go for today. We'll just kind of see how things roll. I did want to talk a little bit about political partisanship based on some new survey data that's come out from the Skeptic Research Center. And it's ironic that, like, hanging out on online groups and discords and things like that, seeing a lot more of this, kind of rear its head. People that don't want to communicate with other people, people that refuse to have anything to do with other people. It's just interesting to me. Give me 1 second. Let me just try refreshing this. The chat thing ain't working. Let me get it going real quick and see if that starts. But yeah, so there we go. Okay, so yeah, it's working. But yeah, so we're gonna be looking at some graphs today and kind of talking through them. Bear with me just a half a second. Let's get this on. So we're gonna start by looking at there's two portions of the survey. One was talking about kind of severing social ties, and the other is talking about support for political violence. So we'll start by looking at the political violence one. Let me make that visible. Okay. So put this over here real quick. Put this down here. Don't need that. All right. Yeah, I'm super professional, as you can see. Let me just resize this real quick so you can see. All right, that's better. I think you should be able to see the chat on screen now too. Like I was saying, I'm going to talk a little bit about supporting political violence amongst Americans. So this survey, I can put the link in the description for if anybody's interested, but it's talking about support for political violence amongst Americans. And essentially the bullet points are that younger and younger people are more okay with political violence. It's interesting in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination. Well, Baxter's demanding a treat. In the wake of the assassination, you'd think, the rhetoric to pull people back would have actually made some differences in people's mind, but it seems like it hasn't. This first graph is looking at political violence is necessary to create social change. And it does lean a little more liberal than conservative, but ultimately, as we get younger, people are more and more okay with political violence. You have Charlie Kirk's assassination, you have the multiple assassination attempts on Trump, you have Melissa Hortman and her husband, which again, I see all these arguments about which side is more violent, but I think that's kind of pointless when both sides are increasingly okay with violence. They surveyed, I think I read through the methodology, it was about 3,000 people with double confirmation checks and things like that across different like racial and, ethnic divides and whatnot. But as we can see in this first graph, the more political, the more younger people are, the more in tune with political violence that they will accept. Now, as we know, people that are older tend to skew more conservative. So it's not surprising that when we look at this across the political divide, there is a increasing sentiment towards violence on the left than there is on the right. But both edges pull towards the violence, unfortunately. I mean, you have these arguments from people who talk about things like horseshoe theory. Um, this idea that the further out on the fringes that you get politically, the more that people are okay with authoritarianism and political violence generally. Sorry, there was something I meant to pull up to show this, and I will. But so the prompt on the left is, if you're protesting against something unjust, it's reasonable to damage property. And then the one on the right is that violence is necessary to create social change. So, again, we see this skewing to the left, but it's not entirely, a left issue. It is a right issue too. Here we go. This is what I was looking for. Let me throw this up. So, I mentioned horseshoe theory. There is this theory that, I'll make this much bigger so you can see it, that essentially the Overton window says, there are normal people on each side, and there is, kind of crazies as we go out towards the edges. But yeah, as like Crazy Bee says in the chat, game like a mom. There is no doubt that the music and universities, and we could definitely get into kind of what the drivers are for this stuff. But ultimately, it doesn't dictate how we fix it. And I'm gonna kind of be painting a little bit of a dark picture, but we can definitely touch on some thoughts. But I think really the solutions that we come back to at the end of the day are mostly about talking and being open to hearing ideas that disagree with us. So again, this breaks down across sexual lines too. As a whole, men are more okay with violence than women. It's surprising that all things considered, you see more men attracted to the right, and yet you see more of the political violence being acceptable slightly more on the left. I think this has a lot to do with the realities of kind of who tends to be in positions of power and whatnot. Hang on, Baxter, this is your last treat. No more treats, okay? Try and do tech and talk and deal with the annoying dog. He's lovable though. So, and then it breaks down across race. So this is it breaking down across race and age. So, you can see that there is a propensity in certain racial groups. What's interesting to me that kind of really stood out is that when you look in the baby boomer generation, there is a much higher propensity towards violence to create social change amongst white people as compared to other populations. But, I don't have a good explanation for it, but it's interesting. But this was the one that really stood out to me, was the violence secondary or as a crossover with education level. And what's really interesting to me, and this touches on what Crazy Bee said, is that it's the college educated or higher that seem to be the most interested in having a propensity towards violence. And so, this definitely associates with the fact that more people on the left, are college educated. The Democrat Party, in a lot of ways, has become a party of the college educated. Whereas the Republican Party, since, the kind of MAGA movement and Trump, has skewed towards a more, collectivist, kind of lower class population. It's interesting, and again, we could pull it up quickly, but in previous surveys during the Biden presidency, the same research group found that conservatives were more supportive of political violence, and so their suggestion is that people who feel out of power tend to be more okay with violence during a given election cycle. And they, if we account for that, then maybe that's part of the reason why people are more violent, being more violence being expressed from the left at this point as opposed to from the right. But I think the big takeaways of this really are that cross-culturally, regardless of what, kind of groups people are from, the men tend to be more violent. So if you're out at, one of these protests or whatnot, be afraid of the men. And that, as we get towards more political kind of acceptance of political violent action, people tend to be better educated. I think that the ideas that have been pushed in the colleges, and I've talked about this a bunch, with fears like pushing the ideas that socialism is acceptable, that you have to kind of, to say it nicely, break a few eggs to make an omelet or whatever. There's this kind of push in the college educated people that it's okay to rile people up. You see this in the kind of elite class that exists in the mainstream media and whatnot. It's unfortunate, but I don't see a easy solution beyond communicating further with other people. Yeah, blunt man, you should be scared because I'm scary. I'm gonna sick Baxter on you after I give him a college education. But yeah, welcome to everybody that's popped in. So the next one that I wanted to look at was secondary to this is the severing of social ties. And like I say, I kind of see this going on in my own life amongst people that I'm around. And I think this plays into the idea that political violence is now acceptable. This is also from Skeptic. The biggest takeaways are that at this point, 1 in 5 Americans have cut ties with friends over political disagreements, and 1 in 6 have cut ties with family. I haven't had family cut ties, but I used to have a very large friend group that was very open, and we'd talk about political stuff. But somewhere between 2016 and 2020, things soured, and I literally got unfriended in real life by a group of people who, for different reasons, had moved further to the left and were no longer open to having a conversation. Even some of the people that I'm still friends with in real life at this point, we used to talk about politics and disagreements and ideas and things like that a lot more. We don't. I think I mentioned that, somebody that I was involved with back in, 2016, we had the ability to disagree on politics. I don't know that we'd be able to even talk today. People have just become so separated. And again, this skews to younger people, as you can see on the, graph that I've pulled up. Definitely skews liberal more. But there is some, growth in the millennial and Gen Z generations of, people stop talking to their family. There's a lot of people that I've met online that have relationships that have been broken because of politics. And it's irrelevant of age. People on the left are, more willing to accept violence and more willing to cut ties with family members or friends that disagree, which is, setting us up for a disaster. I know that people have probably like heard and made fun of the whole like Tim Pool, um, you know, civil war, it's coming kind of stuff. And I think that people think in their minds a civil war like in the 1860s where we lined up on two sides of a field and shot at each other. That's not what I see coming. I mean, I think what we'll look back and see this as is these target assassinations and things like that are going on. Um, to that are driving rhetoric, that are making things hotter, that are making people, feel that they need to, like Steven Crowder said in his video, have, radical self-defense or whatever. Um, this is just going to drive people towards, more violence and more fears of violence, and it's going to be a difficult cycle to come back from, especially if you combine it with the sort of economic issues that are happening, that I think maybe Trump has alleviated slightly, but aren't really significantly improving things. If you look at like grocery costs now versus like 2016 or 2017, it's exorbitant how expensive things are, even if they've come down in the last year. Um, it's ultimately I don't see a way to turn this stuff back. That's what I fear. Um, so then this is I've stopped talking to a friend. Like I say, I'd mentioned that, numbers are up there, but this is that graph. And then this is I've stopped talking to a family member or a friend because of political disagreements. And we can see, independent of age, this skews so heavily left politically. And again, the Democrat Party, to me, maybe I'm wrong about this, but has seriously skewed towards the progressive side of things, and the very liberal who are purity checking as much as the right is purity checking. I mean, I'm sure you guys have seen it, but half of my YouTube feed, if not more, over the past like 2 weeks has been filled with a constant, right wing civil war. Nick Fuentes versus and Tucker Carlson versus Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire and the conservatives and all this kind of ridiculousness. Um, I see it going on with the debate like sphere that I follow some on YouTube, people where, people are picking sides and need to fight each other. I mean, we can get into it, but I think a lot of these things are kind of astroturfed from the outside and not real, and have a lot more to do with creating political strife. I've mentioned it before, but and we could go through. I'm sure people have watched like if any of you guys are from like the Winning Reality Sphere, his videos on Yuri Bezmenov. But I really think there's a lot of outside influence that's kind of pushing us towards increasing violence and increasing partisanship, and it's only going to end badly. Let's see. So this is an interesting one that they teased out from this study. Non-parents means people that have not had kids versus people that have had kids. And it's interesting, but very liberal people, and we know that this uh, people on the left tend to have less kids than people on the right. But non-parented, very liberal people are more okay with severing ties with family members or friends than people that do have kids. It's interesting. I was watching an interview with a ex-Antifa guy who was talking about how the big change in his life was having kids, and recognizing that he had to live for somebody else and build a future for somebody else, and he couldn't just resort to violence when trying to create a better world for his kids. Um, I definitely posted that at one point, but I think that the way that we change this, like I say, part of it is talking and seeing each other as people, but a big part of it is also being able to be focused on the next generation and not being so selfish. I think we live in a very hedonistic and not just like a hey hedonistic sexual society, but when I say that I mean like a self-centered society, a society that puts our needs first, that puts the momentary pleasures of life over the long-term successes in life. Um, and here's the one about not talking to friends anymore. I mean, Again, it's still very high on the left, much more so on the right or in the moderate camps, which kind of reinforces to me the meme of the left left me, I didn't leave the left, which I can probably pull up real quick to exemplify my point. But yeah, I mean, I think that like this data really helps to reinforce that. We'll do this version of it. Oh, that's really low quality. But anyways, makes the point. But essentially, the left has just pulled so far left that it's very difficult to have associations with people. And this is reiterated in the family ties, like who severed family ties. Um, is people who feel that violence in protesting, such through like property damage, are reasonable ways to um, deal with our political differences. um you know I, I fear a lot, like I keep saying, about the issues with the partisanship limiting our ability to come together and find solutions. um you know y- we all want to be the heroes of our own story. We all feel self-righteous. That if anybody watched the streams that I did well, I guess not last year yet, but earlier this year, talking about the Jonathan Haidt stuff, we all we all believe we're the heroes of our story, which, it's good to be that way. But at the same time, we all can push ourselves way too far when we don't open ourselves up to the idea that somebody else could be, right. Um, Kind of to talk a little bit more generically about some political stuff that's been frustrating me lately. I don't know if people had seen the um, stories about Trump wanting to give a dividend to people based on tariffs. Um, Here, I can pull up an article about it. But I saw this earlier this week where Trump talked about how, as the Supreme Court is hearing his case on if he can unilaterally decide on tariffs against other countries as the executive, which um, I'm not an attorney, so what do I know? But I've heard different things from different people about it, and I think there's some concern that I have that it's probably not constitutional. Um, it was interesting to me at the same time. These stories were pushed out about how Trump wants to give a $2,000 tariff dividend to medium and low income workers and families, and it reminds me a lot of the Biden bucks and the COVID money and stuff. One of the things, and I think we were talking about it last week, that really, really frustrates me about this current like political issue going on. Um, yep, as Mouse pointed out, we heard the same thing with the Doge report about, oh, we're going to send money to citizens. I thought that the tariffs and the Doge and all these things were about trying to balance the budget to build a better future. Look, I don't have kids. I mean, I got Baxter somewhere behind me. Um, but I still, even without having children, approach this as we need to think about the future and how we're going to continue to maintain ourselves as a solvent country. Because one of the things that I've kind of been going down a rabbit hole of is how debt drives a lot of violence and drives wars and things like that. um so I don't see us kicking the can down the road with our debt issues just to buy votes as a solution. um I really need to figure out how to get it's in the settings somewhere, but I haven't messed with it, get the thing larger. But yeah, blunt man, what I think about marijuana taxes going up. um I think you should be able to buy marijuana with EBT, right? um Yeah, I mean, look, I think that all these luxuries, I'm not opposed to taxing them. I have a personal issue with like being taxed on my income and then being taxed on my purchases. I think we should try and do away with the income tax, even if that means that we have to increase our sales taxes or even like property taxes. But it's crazy to me that I get um, taxed when I get paid, taxed on the ownership of my property, taxed when I go to the supermarket. And then when you die and you want to leave money to your family, you get taxed up the wazoo again. I mean, you pay taxes left and right constantly. So much of your income gets eaten up by taxes, and then they want to turn around and talk about how like, oh, we lowered the taxes by a few percentage points. Um, you know, I talked about how I know people who only voted for the Democrats because of the promise of free stuff, um, the free college repayment, um, and things like that. I, I don't see this stuff as any different. I assume that if this goes through and they send money to people, they'll find a way for it to come in right before the midterms with a signature with a big check signed by Donald Trump, and then people can, or on the hope that people will go to the polls and be like, well, Donald Trump gave me money, so uh, I should get more money. I better vote for him, as opposed to trying to create a more uh, well thought out and reasonable kind of voter base and populace. They're just playing partisan games on both sides of the aisle. Um, I can't remember the exact numbers, but you know, we're not seeing prices come down, and the Trump people are arguing that giving money to people will help with you know, uh, offsetting the raise in consumer prices. Um, like Ann mentioned before, prices haven't really come down that much. But I think that, increasing wages by dealing with the undercutting via the illegal immigration issue is much more useful, and will lead to better outcomes in the long term for our fellow countrymen. Um, I don't. Let me see if there's anything in it worth sharing. But I was reading a um, report from the on like the impacts of illegal immigrants on households, and the bullet point takeaways here. I think let me do it this way. We can go through the bullet points. So and again, I don't sorry, tech is for smart people, not for idiots like me. All right, we'll just we'll lose chat on here for a little bit. There we go. Okay. So I don't know if you guys can read that or whatnot, um but yeah, I mean, before I get into this, like what Crazy Bee just mentioned about, budgeting and whatnot. I think I told the story, but I've talked to people who are talking about like their Christmas shopping and the insane amounts of money they're spending, and yet concerned about needing their SNAP or EBT benefits. And to me, I hear that and I go, you know, that could feed your family for months. I don't understand why you're spending all that kind of money. I get that you want to give your kids a wonderful Christmas and lots of presents or whatever, but you have to live within your means. Can survive on rice and beans if you had to. But yeah, so with the illegal immigrant impact stuff, so this report estimates that you talk about how like there's estimate ranges of 10.3 to 11.4 unauthorized individuals living in the United States during the Biden-Harris administration. They released up to 5.6 million illegal aliens, with another 1.9, almost 2 million having been gotaways. The 2023 net cost of illegal immigration, including federal, state, and local levels, is assumed to be about $150 billion. Not to even talk about how the people most impacted by the illegal immigrants is the low income households, where people rely on, sort of lower income jobs that are easily filled by people who don't have skills per se. It's estimated that illegal immigration costs the American taxpayer about $1,100 a year. Um, uh, and a big part of that is the fact that kind of so much of it is people who come to the States with their and then have children here, and then their children are technically citizens and can get benefits. A big portion of it is child tax benefits and stuff like that. But it's estimated, and this is based on House oversight stuff, which I can again post. But it's estimated that something like 60% of immigrants are on EBT or some sort of welfare program. Let me share this real quick. So this is from the House Oversight Committee, talking about lifetime fiscal impacts of illegal immigrants by the education attainment. And the vast majority we know are high school or lower than high school. And a lifetime, balance, we're talking about $173,000 and some change if you don't even have a high school, diploma. The estimated 2023 adjusted cost of illegal immigrants is $68,000 per illegal immigrant. It adds up. This is probably a graph you saw going around. Again, this is from the House Oversight Committee based on the Public Use 2022 survey, which basically shows that yes, U.S. born head of the household families are using welfare more, but it doesn't mean that legal and illegal immigrants aren't using these things. I mean, I know we talked about how we were talking last week about Mamdani and the election. Ultimately, if you look at the kind of data there, a big portion of Mamdani's win was the immigrants to New York, and the fact that New York has really shifted more into a immigrant-based society. And then this is what I was getting at is like, I don't know how well this is coming through on the screen, but the top 10 occupations where illegal immigrants are the largest share. 30% of plaster and stucco masons are illegal immigrants. 30% of gardeners, sorters, and agricultural product workers are illegal immigrants. Drywall installation, ceiling tile, etc., 28%. Agricultural workers, 28%. Textile garment pressing, like your dry cleaner, maybe, 26%. Roofers, 24%. Sewing machine operators, 22%. Painters, 20%. But even still, when you look at these, it's almost the same numbers for legal immigrants. So, people can go on and on about, and I don't know these people are necessarily H-1B visa recipients, but they are legal immigrants. The vast majority of these sort of low-skill jobs are being taken up by non-natives, by people that are not from the United States. And if we look at the 10 occupations where there's the largest number, not by percentage, but the largest number, you're talking about maids and housekeeping cleaners, cooks, construction, labor, agricultural workers, groundskeepers, janitors, drivers, truck drivers, cashiers, carpenters, all labor workers, all of these sort of low skill laborers. And the House, data that they share estimates, and this is from August of 2018, with a estimated increase, talking about 7.5 million illegal immigrants working in these sectors. I mean, I know we can all on the right mock like the dumb ladies from The View talking about how what are we going to do? Who's going to clean our this? Who's going to do this? Who's going to watch our kids? There's some truth to what they're saying, even if we don't want to admit it. But the reality still comes back to we as Americans and American-born workers have to be more okay with taking jobs that are not end all be all jobs. We've raised kids with this idea that they don't have to work. I think probably most of the people that are in chat or would watch this probably have been working for much of their life and started working at a young age. And part of that is why you lean conservative, or have more conservative sensibilities. The reality is that they joke around. If you're you're a person with a heart, then in your 20s you will be a liberal, and if you're and then as you grow up, once you start paying taxes, you'll become conservative, or have a family, you'll be conservative. I think the reality is that people that see how much of their money is taken by taxes, recognize how much their time is worth, make decisions that push themselves more towards trying to earn more. There's plenty of data out there that shows that men that are married earn more than men that are not married, because men that are married tend to push more for more pay, will work extra hours, things along those lines, as opposed to men who are unmarried and don't have those responsibilities. Baxter, do you feel you need more treats? Well, if the chat tells me, then we'll consider it. So I made the mistake of teaching Baxter that he could trade like trash or things for treats that he finds around. So he intentionally knocks over my trash bin that is in the bathroom or up here in the office, and brings me like bottles that he's gotten a hold of, or like little piece of trash he's gotten out of the trash can to trade for treats. Devious little guy. Maybe we should maybe we need to send him to work and he can take some of these jobs. But yeah, I mean, like I say, it impacts the low skill workers more than it does high skill workers. This is translating to less men who are U.S. born being in the workforce, especially at levels of not having a bachelor's degree or more. Since 2019, labor force participation of men with high school degrees or less has fallen a few percentage points or stagnated. People with no bachelor's, and if you look at bachelor's degrees, it's also relatively stagnant. Whereas we had significant growth from the 80s on, this goes from the 60s on, but all this stuff has stagnated in the last few years, which scares me a lot for where our country is going when people can't, find jobs and work. And then this is looking at people who are between 25 and 54, and again, it's the same sort of thing. We see that the lower the education, the more stagnation there is, because these jobs are being taken over by people who are coming into the country both legally and illegally, as opposed to people, continuing to earn an income. So like I was saying, this is back to the other report we were looking at, just going through the bullet points. But there's about 2.7 million households where there's at least one illegal head of the household and one child. And there are about 5.3 million U.S. born children of illegal immigrants or aliens who hold social security numbers. I think I didn't have a chance to read through this whole thing, but this is the SNAP report. Show where they pulled the data from for this, but we're spending about $5.8 billion a year on SNAP benefits for children of illegal immigrants or aliens. The I forget what that stands for. TANF benefits, the temporary assistance for needy families benefits for U.S. born children of illegal aliens is about $1.4 billion a year. And you're talking about $13.4 billion in child tax credits between 2022 in 2022 for the 2021 tax year, which is up from 5 which is pretty significant. And then, again, the Democrats and whatnot will go on and on about how, how Trump held up the bill because of, not wanting to do Medicare and Medicaid spending. But the reality is that the CBO discussed how, when you actually get down to it with the money that we're sending to, states to pay for Medicaid funding for emergency services, you're talking about another $15-16 billion. All these people want to yell about how illegal immigrants can't be signed up for healthcare, but we have a law in the United States called EMTALA, the Emergency Medicine Treatment and Labor Act, which requires it was passed in 1986 to try and alleviate patient dumping, where hospitals would just get rid of patients because they couldn't pay, and so you're required to treat patients, which is why you don't get a bill ahead of time in a hospital. You get a bill after the fact. So, even independent of the fact that they may not be signed up for healthcare, they can still benefit from these healthcare, which carries burden on to the rest of the system, especially with the, Obamacare related, stipends and whatnot. And then the last thing that this report talked about is the benefits from the pandemic, which Trump has been working on cutting. But, even if you take New York alone, they created a $2.1 billion program for illegals living in the U.S. And they estimated that there's 290,000 people in New York, including 92,000 more who could receive up to a $15,000 lump sum, which is the equivalent of $300 per week of unemployment for the past year. And despite the fact that these people are not authorized to work in the United States, they're still being considered, to be paid this money under lost employment because of the pandemic. Now, I did see something that talked about one of the. Let me find it real quick. So, did see this thing where the Secretary of Agriculture was talking about how they want to try to reassess and rebuild SNAP. But do I realistically think this is going to happen? Meh. I mean, I'm not sold on it. Here, let me.
It was send letters on day one.
See if this comes through.
When I was sworn in, which was earlier this year in February.
My bad. Hang on a second. I had this figured out before. Whatever. Sorry about. I think it's double playing. I don't know. You guys can confirm, but I had this figured out before, but might not have it figured out right now.
The very first thing I did was send letters to every single state in America and said, never before has the federal government asked for the data, but it is a new day. President Trump is the president. We know there's a lot of fraud. We need to help partner with you all to figure out how to make sure that this money and these benefits go to those who truly need it and not rife with fraud and corruption. 29 states, mostly the red states, responded with their data sets February, March, April. So the numbers that you're talking through, those are numbers that we have been collecting and analyzing since early summer, late spring. The fact that this spotlight shined on Snap has allowed us to talk about it. But here's the most unbelievable news I have really just over the last few days, that 5,000 dead people, that was just 1 month. The number is closer to 186,000 deceased men and women and children in this country are receiving a check. Now, that is what we're really going to start clamping down on. 500,000 are getting 2. But here's the really stunning thing. This is just data from those 29 mostly red states. Can you imagine when we get our hands on the blue state data, what we're going to find? It's going to give us a platform and a trajectory to fundamentally rebuild this program, have everyone reapply for their benefit, make sure that everyone that's taking a taxpayer-funded benefit through SNAP or food stamps, that they literally are vulnerable and they can't survive without it. And that's the next step here.
So, yeah, I mean, we'll see if any of that actually happens, but that's what they're talking about. I hope that played through and you could hear it properly. But yeah, I mean, the numbers, they're going to give you whatever numbers they're going to give you. Everybody's got their political agenda. It's unfortunate. I don't know if anybody, has anything that they wanted to kind of talk about more. I'm kind of, I can go on about my like gripes and complaints and whatnot, but that was at least what I had, kind of thought about. Actually, Crown Target coming reminded me. I have something I need to show off. Let me download it real quick. Guys, because of people here. So, even though I'm not the potato pope anymore, I still can't go without, my favorite potato stuff. So we were joking around, Crown Target and I, about the space potatoes. If you saw us in the one of the Discords, but got my space potato. Let me see where to put it. It's your spice potato. Go into the golden potato. But yeah, so I I think ultimately my takeaway from all this is that we just, as a kind of society, need to find more ways to talk, find more ways to continue to communicate, to not judge each other as much, and don't write people off just because they have a difference in politics than you. Ultimately, at the end of the day, people have different reasons, but we all see ourselves as the hero of our own story, and we all are going to kind of be viewing things through the history that we have, the perspectives that we have been, the information that we're exposed to. So the best way to deal with the partisanship is to not cut people off and to continue to communicate. The person that's on your Discord channel that pisses you off, don't mute them. Try and see why they believe what they believe and get a better understanding of how you can maybe improve your own ideas or change their mind. The worst thing that happens when you have a discussion with somebody and you don't agree at the end of the day is you learn something, or you change your mind, or you build a better argument for what you believe in. But it's not going to hurt you to disagree with somebody, and things become violent when we just stop communicating, period. So I hope everybody has a great weekend. There's UFC later. I forget exactly what time that starts. Um, Why'd you say that right now, Blunt Man? Now I have to keep talking. Um, I'm just messing. Universal healthcare. Look, I like the idea of having access to healthcare for people, regardless of who they are and what their background is. And I agree that the financial burden shouldn't stop people from being able to get healthcare. I think that it's unfortunate that when you see the information put out about universal healthcare systems, they only look at one metric. They don't look at outcomes. Um, they don't look at outcomes. They look at satisfaction scores. And in socialist, kind of universal healthcare systems, they definitely view things more favorably because they don't think they're paying for it, even though you're paying through your taxes for it. Um, there is a problem in those systems with healthcare being rationed, essentially, and a government body based on financials deciding what care you can and can't get, or should and should not get. Um, the unfortunate reality of the situation is that healthcare is expensive, um, no matter what we do with it. And I think the best solution is to do something like a voucher-based system where the market stands. The market can determine what it thinks is, of value or not, and costs. But I think some simple changes we could do is knowing costs up front. I think another thing that we could do that would help to improve things would be if we instead of having people have to pay a tax to get their health care like we do with Obamacare, if we did want, and then the money go directly to a insurance company, I think it would be better if we, and do this with schools too, give vouchers to individuals who can then go take it to somebody who is in the open market offering it. But I don't have all the answers. I don't know. This is my 2 cents, but it's definitely something we could talk more about. Um, but yeah, so UFC prelims at 8, main card at 10 o'clock. Um, I've been told that I should start playing Arc Raiders, and that's a really good game. So I might check that out sometime later. But I don't want to monopolize everybody's time too long. It's always a pleasure to chat with you guys. And like I was saying before, if anybody ever does want to join into the fun, let me know on Discord. Right now I'm kind of reading into stuff about the Federal Reserve and kind of how banking and usury has driven a lot of the modern conflicts, which may turn into a show at some point. Um, but yeah, if anybody ever wants to join in, even if Ren and I are both here, you're always welcome to just hit me up. Otherwise, y'all have a good day. Don't be like the people in the polls. Reach out to your family, even if they don't agree with you, and I don't know, have them over for dinner or something, and talk about the game and the kids and the dogs and the other good things, and avoid the politics, because there's still good things in life even if we don't all agree. So with that, I'm going to hit the intro one more time and then shut her down. I hope to catch you guys for some UFC later. Everybody have a good rest of your day. Thanks for coming by.